Okay, our next speakers are Ed Wilson, who is the president of Tea Party Solutions in Ocala, and Steve Hunter, a Vietnam War veteran, worked for years for Lockheed Martin, and he is very, very active in the Tea Party movement, particularly working against Agenda 21. I'd like to introduce Steve Hunter and Ed Wilson.
Okay, I want to get into the land grabs. The materials that we use, by the way, we pull off the internet either right out of what congressional records are, and Ed Wilson is going to brief one of the tools that we use to stop the government from being able to come in and do the takeovers of your land and your properties. Most of this land grabs can be stopped at the local level. The federal government doesn't have the authority just to override your local politicians. So you can stop them, but you need to do it. And one of the things that we're doing when we do these is to get people to understand what this Agenda 21 is, how deep it goes, and to bring you up to speed so that you can go off and you can go talk to your elected officials, you can go talk to the people in your community and have something that you can fall back on. The research that we've already done, the briefings that we've already done are available to you to use to help you do that. We've got to stop this. Okay, land grabs. One of the really interesting things is the Omnibus Public Land Management Act of 2009 was just put into service. It's 466 pages. I just went through one part of it, and this is the addition to the wilderness system that they're putting in. As you can see, it's a huge list of locations. They're going to expand these, and when they do this, they'll start making parts of them off limits to human beings to be able to go see. That's the history. That's the way they do it. And they will also include conservation easements to get to these. I'll be going through one of them in particular. We get a little further down. Land grabs were authorized by the Antiquities Act in 1906 by the federal government. It wasn't intended for them to go off and do all the land grabs they've done. It was intended to protect some Indian artifacts that they had found, and the Congress ran the bill through real quick so they could stop people from going in and destroying it. Well, Teddy Roosevelt was the president, and he signed it into law, and then turned around right away and went in and did the first land grab. It was like millions of acres went under Teddy Roosevelt. And then he created, do y'all recall the movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind?
Yeah.
You remember that tower that was in there?
Yeah.
That's the Devil's Tower. And that's in Black Hills, Croc County, Wyoming. And it's really there, and it really looks like that. However, it's a national park, and you can't really get to it. You can see it from a long way away, but you can't do anything there.
$12, you can drive to it.
Well, you can get pretty close to it. They've got a gift store down the bottom, but it's not something you're going to go up and walk around on. Darter on this list is really Carter, because my hands don't work very well when they're tired. So it became, Darter is really Carter. He privatized 56 million acres while he was president. Bill Clinton took 1.7 million acres, 2,700 square miles of Utah and Arizona from the United States. Now these lands that they took, that's where all our natural resources were, all our oil, all our coal, all of the things that made us independent from the rest of the world. And of course, Clinton was the first president that was actually implementing Agenda 21. So all of these things that you see that go on basically started under Clinton. the secretarial order, oh, the one thing that I told you I was going to talk a little bit more about was this Interior Secretary Ken Salazar's Secretarial Order 3310, which basically gave him the authority to go off and go get a whole bunch more land and to declare land as wildlands, which once it's declared wildlands, no human being can set foot on it anymore. Okay? The only problem is Obama didn't have the authority to give him that authority, but he did it. Nobody stopped. In March 2nd of 2010, the Washington Times got a secret document that Obama had that talked about the land that they're targeting to basically take away from the country. I know probably everybody here heard about that, where they were going to turn a whole lot of land into wildlands. That process is going on. It was marked internal draft. All right, since actually the late 80s, early 90s, in 1990, the Department of Environmental Resource Management was formed up in Miami. Miami was actually a pilot city for the International Council for Local Environmental Initiatives. And at that time, Harvey Rubin was the vice chair of the ICLIE, which is the environmental, that's the ICLIE in Miami. And he was vice chair for ICLIE, period. So he's been there, and he is the clerk of the courts in Miami. That's an elected position, and he keeps getting elected. But anyhow, he brought Durham in, and Durham has been reclassifying property since they started to become wetlands. And we actually went down there and worked with Ida Fernandez on this. And she was, you know, their properties they were farming it. A lot of people were farming their properties. Colonel McAllister went down with us, and he actually called the property assessor's office and talked to them about what is this zoning on this property, because all the zoning in this 8.5 square mile area was called unzoned. And they told him, this property is, that means you can use it for residential or agricultural. So he said, well, what can I do on it? I said, you can do anything you want. And then he asked him about, well, this other agency is claiming that they have the right to change what this land is used for, and they changed it to wetlands. And he says, do they have the authority? Who's got the authority to do that? Is it you, or is it this other organization? And the lady told him, it's us. And he says, well, do you have this happen often? She said, we have it happen all the time. But the Durham is not legally able to make those changes, but they've made it. Now, what they also do is they start issuing citations, and they fine the people. What they do is they bankrupt them until they wind up walking away from their property, unless they've got hundreds of thousands or even millions to fight it. There are people that have lost millions of dollars fighting. There are 1,500 families in the Miami-Dade area that have lost their homes as a result of Durham doing this. You've got another one that you've seen that's it's pretty public lately, the Sackets in Idaho, where they bought property on a lake, wanted to build a home. The EPA came in, classed it as wetlands, told them they couldn't do that. Wanted them to do the same thing in Miami, take it down to the bedrock and leave. You can own the property, but you can't do anything on it. But you can pay taxes, and that's the way they leave it. In the Miami area, people walked away from their property. What happened as they walked away, the property wound up going to the Water Management District. The Water Management District, they passed a special law in Miami. If there were any deficiencies against a piece of property, they didn't have to list it. So when people would come in, the Water Management District would hold it for 2 years. People would come in and say, oh, there's a great buy on a piece of property. They'd run it through their title research. The title companies would say, hey, it comes up fine. But that law that they passed that says that deficiency didn't have to be listed made that little deficiency that the Durham had posted, the violations against that property, not visible to anybody until after the people bought the property. Then they would come in and say, you've got a violation and you need to take care of it. We want you to take your property back to the bedrock and leave. You can't be on it. 1,500 homes went away. Now, what they did was they really financed themselves really well. Durham is a self-financed organization. They don't get tax funding. They get their money out of fining people for violations that are, they're really not legal. Another thing that's going on is the Everglades Headwaters Restoration Project, which started in, I believe it was November, when Ken Salazar announced in the Orlando Sentinel that they were going to buy 50,000 acres of land between Orlando and Kissimmee, and they were going to do this Headwaters Restoration Project. Well, they started having meetings with the public, and they had 4 meetings. This piece of property, what they're doing is buying the 50,000 acres. When we asked them about the money and where it comes from, the Department of Interior was at the meeting. The first meeting was in Kissimmee. There were 21 representatives from the government and from the conservation people at this meeting that we all pay our tax dollars to be there. Okay? Now, the people in Orlando and Kissimmee told them to pack up their stuff and go home. They weren't interested. They went to Sebring, Okeechobee, and Vero Beach, had the same responses in all of them. And they continued. They have come out with their plan. Just because the public doesn't want it, doesn't mean they're not going to do it. The Department of Interior told us at the first meeting that they had between $750 million and $1 billion to buy that 50,000 acres of land that nobody wanted to sell. Okay? Now, recently, Senator Nelson has been successful in getting another $100 million to handle the conservation easements which surround the property, but you still own the property. However, you're going to be restricted in what you can do with it, and eventually, it's like your kids aren't really going to get your property anymore. It's going to be worthless to them. So it's going to revert back to the government's going to wind up owning it. Now, Florida is a big target for the EPA and for Agenda 21. This Everglades Restoration Project, the one that they're doing between Kissimmee and Lake Okeechobee, that's phase 1. There's 3 more phases. And if you go to the internet and look through it, you will see that it takes in most of South Florida. All the way over to here, and all the way down to the south of Florida, on the East Coast the same way. Now there's similar activities going on all across the country. The organizations that bring you this wonderful stuff are organizations you really wouldn't realize what they're doing. The big one that they use most of all is the Metropolitan Planning Organizations. But you've now got your Sustainable Communities Partnership. Yep. Oh, by the way, all these land use plans, as a result of these groups, those people aren't elected officials. They're in groups that are bridged across lines where elections occur, so that the people, you can't do anything about them. They don't work for you. You didn't elect them. The Sustainable Communities Partnership is EPA, HUD, and DOT. They've got $688 million earmarked for this project. Gee, I thought we were broke. Guess we're not. These 8 categories are needs that HUD has defined. And they also define in their availability for grants, they've got a document out that tells you how to apply for them. I put a couple of things in here on them. It's not a big document. You can go download it. It's only like 30 pages. And it tells you all of the things that you need to do to be able to get the grants that they're offering. And they're very detailed about it. They come out with everything in there about it. It has to do with you've got to have somebody that's working with you that's done these kinds of things. When you read the description of it, the first thing that comes to mind is acorn. Okay, so that's the kind of organizations that are working it. Executive Order 13575, White House Rural Council. This purpose of this is to come out and do the same thing with the farmers in the area, where they will come in and help them to make the, to determine what they're going to grow, when they're going to grow it. And by the way, there's a lot of grants that goes with this. And when they get done, the farmers will be doing exactly what they want them to do and nothing else. This list is a lot of things on there, but I'm going to kind of go through this real quick because we've got another few minutes to go on this next briefing. And how do I get to the next briefing, Mark?
Second.
Nope, not that one. That one. Okay, in this briefing, Ed and I spent a long time putting it together, and then we took the briefing and made a briefing of the briefing for Tea Party groups on how to use the briefing. Because this briefing is for you to go to your elected officials and for you to be able to do what we've done. We will come and help you whenever you need, and we, just like Chris Ann, we don't charge for this. And most of the people that are in the agendas will help you. What we're really trying to do is get you guys all to the point where you can go do these things yourselves and you'll be agenders, so that you can go talk to your elected officials. There's just not enough of us to be able to make this work. If we don't get more people involved and helping us, we're not going to win. Ed?
My name's Ed Wilson. We've had a bunch of good speakers this morning, huh? How about it? We started off with a gentleman talking about how they are approaching this from a social, anti-Christian point of view. Then we had how they're using the climate and trumped up climate change to try to come at it, right? Use the environmentalists. They don't care about the environment. They only care about using it to reach their goals. Then we had Chris Ann talk about how they're using education and have been for years. We were all a part of it, right? All very good points. All part of it. Everything you see around you connected with the government or the United Nations and all this regulation is all designed to implement the one world government. We put together this presentation with a property rights slant, and we made the presentation to the county government and to the city council in Ocala. Okay? Believe me, I don't have a PhD. If I can get up here and do this stuff, all y'all can get up here and do this stuff. Have y'all been motivated this morning? Are you angry about it?
Yes.
Please take what you learned here today and do something about it. Like Colonel McAllister said, we have got to get the word out. Most folks don't have a clue. So when we put this presentation together, we try to keep it a very complicated subject as simple as possible, because I'm a real keep it simple, stupid kind of guy. And we were trying to go to the city council and the county government and the county employees. We wanted them to buy into it and research it further for themselves. So I kept it about property. Anyway, we really need your help. Y'all have got to spread the word. Take this presentation, take everything you learned here today, and spread the word. It's very important. Together. This briefing was developed to communicate to our elected officials the importance of property rights, where those rights come from, and the responsibility in protecting those rights that public officials have. This briefing will cover how and who are trying to eliminate our property rights and why. These first two slides open pointing out that Agenda 21 is a United Nations program intent on violating our inalienable God-given rights, and that our nation was founded as a sovereign nation to protect those unalienable rights that God gave us, not the government. These two slides are to make it clear that our elected officials, that unalienable rights are not government options, but are God-given. When we go into the documents written by our founding fathers and our Declaration of Independence, Bill of Rights, and by our founding and the Constitution, guarantee that our constitutional government's main job is to protect those rights from all enemies, regardless of whether they are outside of our sovereign nation or inside, and that those rights are protected best locally. Our national sovereignty and property are sacred, and that is to be protected above all else. Sustainable development sounds like something reasonable and something we should all want. However, the UN version embraces the communist version of sustainable development, which uses environmentalists and environmentalist passion to limit human activity and to control everything humans do. I think it's been mentioned that the left really likes to take good words and turn them into bad things, right? These two slides provide a little history about Agenda 21, the President's Council on Sustainable Development, and how the proponents of sustainable development put a positive slant on sustainable development to get the general public to perceive sustainable development as a positive influence on a community and country. There's an awful lot of sustainable development on that page. These two slides compare the political philosophy of the UN's version of rights, as the rights come from government, and those rights to our Bill of Rights and Declaration of Independence versions, which mean our rights come from government. These two slides highlight Agenda 21's three elements and focus on what they actually achieve and their political philosophy, and one of the main players in our government directly involved with the main organization organizing local communities to implement ordinances and regulations to implement Agenda 21. These two slides show the elected officials some of the mindsets of the people that came up with this insidious plan and how they plan to use the environmentalists to institute wealth transfer and destroy our country. These two slides show the elected officials how Agenda 21 uses regulations, promotes tax incentives, partnerships with private companies, and how the economy is used to gain power and economic control over communities, and moving oversight to unelected officials, and the 3 E's place man above nature, and the Bible specifically gives dominion to man over all of the earth. The Bible puts man above nature. Right? Sorry. I'm good at saying stuff wrong, so say I told you, y'all could do it too. The UN and Agenda 21 wants to put nature above man. The Bible gives man dominion over all the earth. These two slides show government officials how the UN has developed an organization to infiltrate local governments and promote their environmental, green, socialistic agenda, and it makes it sound as if they have all the solutions to local government's problems. ICLIE is the International Council for Local Environmental Initiatives, renamed Local Governments for Sustainability, and how they use it to infiltrate local governments. In August, ICLIE changed their website claiming they had no connection to the UN. They are now an NGO, like many other NGOs, certified by the UN, and they have infiltrated our local governments with ready solutions to the now mandated federal government programs on sustainability, green, or smart growth. These programs are hamstringing our community and costing trillions with no benefits, no independence from foreign oil, no environmental improvements, and massive unemployment. The federal government and ICLIE are implementing the UN Agenda 21 program and bringing the U.S. down to the same or lower level than the rest of the world per the UN plan. These two slides cover techniques used by ICLIE facilitators to arrive at consensus and why local governments are enticed into becoming members of ICLIE and unknowingly subvert the Constitution of the U.S. and the state of Florida. The 5-star graphic is something they may recognize as something that was used by ICLIE in planning sessions with their local government to promote green or sustainable development. These two slides provide a partial list of funding sources and explain how they work, and shows the wildlands map of what Agenda 21 plans for the land use of our country. The black areas are the only areas where people will be allowed to live. I don't see a lot of black. This slide provides methods the elected officials can take to restore our freedoms and perform the job government is supposed to do under the Constitution, which is protect our equal rights, our God-given rights, right? This slide wraps up the presentation and restates government's purpose and encourages them to follow the Constitution. This presentation should be read while the slides are changed to correlate to the script. The officials being briefed should be given a copy of the script and a copy of the slides with 2 per page. We also give them a copy of the draft covenant on the environment, and also a copy of Agenda 21 and any other support material so that they can further research it themselves. Yes?
Have you spoken to our Attorney General? Because obviously if Durham has no rights to climb, people are being hurt. I mean, not just Durham, but this sustainability is an Agenda 21 that was never passed by our Senate. You know, she is going after the EPA. She just mentioned the lawsuit with Nebraska against the EPA, but she is in charge of protecting the Floridians, especially when it comes to our constitutional right to private property.
We have given information. We are working on it.
She is aware.
She's aware.
It's tough to get there, but yes, we have been sending information in letters and so forth, and we are working on